Yeah, so I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
are you comfortable talking about your disability?
Yeah.
I think the general public a lot of time doesn't know how to react if
Yeah.
somebody is different, and you don't know, should I ask, should I not ask? And
Yeah.
so I wanted to see if you can just give some hints and tips and
No, I'll be fully open, and more than hints and tips. It's just a fully open conversation.
cool. I love it. I
Welcome
love
to
it.
the Sustainable Living Podcast. Tips, tools, and tactics for living a heart-centered life that honors Mother Earth and her inhabitants. The information shared on the Sustainable Living Podcast reflects the opinions of host Marian West, Janice Friant, and their guests. Please use your own discretion in research before applying any information to your individual situation. Now, here are your hosts.
Hello, this is
and Janice.
Marianne West, your host, and we are back with another Sunday conversation. I hope you enjoyed our last episode with Daryl Smith, where we dove deeply into what it means to be living with depression. Today, I encourage you to listen to the very end of our show because we are going to have another episode with Dr. Adrian Cooper. And he is our expert on how to create a wildlife habitat in your own backyard, together with your neighbors, one plant at a time. And Dr. Adrian Cooper is answering listeners' questions he got after we aired the full episode with him. And then he's also giving us great tips on how to create this wildlife habitat we know is so important to have in the world or in our environment, anyways. So, without further ado, here is today's Sunday conversation. And I'm here with a really amazing woman, and I'm so pleased that she's on our podcast. So, let me tell you about her. She's an author, she makes jewelry, she's an artist, she has a podcast, she's an athlete, she's a motivational speaker. It's like blowing my mind already. She knows all about computers, which I know nothing about. And, and she also just became a drone pilot. I'm going to pick her brain about in just a little while. So I want you to welcome Win Charles. I'm so pleased to have you on the podcast. And
Well,
the other thing I want to tell you, Win knows a little bit about overcoming a few difficulties in life. Welcome, Win.
well, I have to make a correction. Although I wish I was a drone pilot. That's my co-host. That's my co-host who also has cerebral palsy, and he's legally blind. And
Oh,
I don't know how he does it. We have to ask him because I don't know how he does it. Drones and me don't mix, but
okay.
the rest of it do. The rest of it do. So that's okay. That's
So I heard it wrong. I got it from a podcast and I went like, yeah, she's amazing. She's doing all
yeah.
those things.
No, I wish I wish I was doing that. No, but I am. I will tell you, I am the second adaptive snowboarder in the U.S.
Cool.
because I that's just the way I roll. I've been doing it since age 16, since I was age 16, and I am 29 now, and it's a ton of fun, and yeah, but I am a published author, a 7-time published author, and how I do that is through Apple's dictation. On the Android side, you guys have Dragon Naturally Speaking, and so you can write a book basically on a cell phone.
Cool. Very cool. So, Vin, just to let our audience know, would you tell us about what said difficulty is in your life you had to overcome from very early on?
Said difficult, said
It's a difficulty,
difficulty
isn't it?
without a coughing attack. Good. Okay. Said difficulty without a coughing attack is cerebral palsy. And cerebral palsy is a lack of oxygen at birth to the brain. Basically, it's caused by a childhood stroke. It's caused by choking on a piece of popcorn, or it's caused by the umbilical cord being wrapped around the child's neck.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I am almost 30 years old. I've been living and functioning with this disability for almost 30 years. I'm 29 now. And I am super blessed to have this support not only of my family, but of a huge network, which is growing even stronger every day because of my podcast. We'll get to that in a minute. And so it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of people don't understand cerebral palsy, and a lot of people just give me crazy looks. And it's interesting that you said before we called it this podcast, give me some of your tips as to how to deal with people with disabilities. And I'm going to be honest with you and your listeners. My best tip is, if you have the time, talk to the disabled person. Don't talk to the aide necessarily who's standing by the disabled person. Talk to the disabled person, and then you'll get a whole lot of information out of them. Whereas if you talk to the aide and they're like that, it just turns into a whole mess of problems.
Yeah, and it's almost like saying you're not there if you took to the
Yeah,
aid and said, "Oh, to
yeah,
the person,"
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good tip I want to throw out there, because I feel that a lot of people, if they see somebody who is a little bit different, they just don't know. They are like, "Oh, should I look? Should I not look?" And so many people just turn away from it. And I love how you are so visible in the world. And I said difficulty because you do have a disability, but that's not what defines you. You
No.
are like so present in the world, and you do so many things. And part of our mission in the Sustainable Living podcast is to help people to find a full life in every way, and
Yeah,
especially to build community.
yes,
And we all are together in this. And from what I'm hearing you say is that your community is also part of your success, right?
yes. Without the community, I wouldn't be functioning. Without my family, I wouldn't be functioning. And back in '87, they told the families of cerebral palsy, including my family, to stick kids in a home and they'll never be able to function. Well, my parents and the rest of the parents, some of the parents took the doctor's advice, but my parents, and I believe about 10 of the parents, said, no way, no way we'll accept this child as she is and love her unconditionally. And so, without medical treatment from day one, I am very lucky, because I think most people are learning about disabilities when those kids don't reach those milestones, and then you're in a heck of a lot of trouble, because then you'll have to work backwards. My family was willing and able to do everything for me from the get go. So I didn't necessarily have to work backwards. I got to work forwards. Nowadays, the parents wait until they reach those critical milestones. And then if they don't reach those critical milestones, the parents start investigating it, which opens up a whole other can of worms and a whole other expensive can of worms too, because you not only now have to work backwards, you have to put not only a expense of raising a typical child on top of it, you have to put the expense of raising a disabled child, from the wheelchairs to the walkers to the G tubes. A G tube goes directly into the child's or the adult's stomach, and that's how they get fed. And 9 times out of 10, as I was just talking to someone this morning, I have learned over the years that you not only have to be your own advocate, you have to have people fighting for you along with you doing it yourself.
Absolutely. If you don't mind me asking, are you wheelchair bound or can you walk?
I I don't mind you asking that at all. When I wrote my original biography, which is I Come a Win, which yes, that can be found on Amazon. I was able to walk up until the age of 18, and then I had a horrible scoliosis surgery, which went horribly wrong, and I go into detail in that book. And so now I'm on an assistive device, but my next goal is to have another back surgery, which is a new thing in my life, and hopefully get off this assistive device that I'm on.
So, but you're still snowboarding, right?
Yep, even with my bad back, I'm surprised my back could take it. No, but I am still snowboarding, and I will even be a better snowboarder next ski season when my back gets fully recovered.
Excellent. So, we are going to send you lots of good energy when you go into the surgery.
That's what I need. That's what I need right now. And so basically, and so that's what I need right now. But basically, on a day to day basis, you never know how CP is going to act due to not only the muscle structures, but the muscles themselves. They get tight and have contractions, and that's what they call tone. And so, if I don't work out and if I don't stay on top of my CP and walk and do all that, I would be a mess, because if you don't stay on top of any disability, including diabetes, or let's just say cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy can get on top of you, and then you're going to be messed, because in this case, I kind of let cerebral palsy get on top of me, but it wasn't to the point where I am a mess yet. If I waited one more year, I would be a mess. I learned my lesson the hard way, and now I have to do practicing what I preach. Don't let any disability get on top of you.
And I think that's good advice for life, period. Having a disability or not,
Yeah,
it's important to keep your body in good
yeah,
health with
yeah,
diet and exercise.
yes,
You just have that added part to you that it's even more important.
y-
But really, I think people without a disability just kind of fool themselves to think that you can not take care of your
yes,
body and be
exactly,
okay.
exactly. So now I have to do practicing what I'm preaching and give myself self love with my back. But that being said, people ask me all the time, how do you go to the gym on a consistent basis? How do you do PT on a consistent basis? Which we'll get into in a minute, an alternative PT program that I'm in. And I schedule it. Here's another tip for you guys. I schedule it as a meeting. I put it in my schedule. I I put it in my schedule. I try not to take my phone. People know my schedule by now. And so if they see Win has PT on Thursdays, which I consider snowboarding a form of PT, so they know I'm out of the office. They know that my cell phone isn't allowed at the gym. My Jim now has a policy that I think is the best policy on the planet. No cell phones. Please refrain from using a cell phone in this area.
I love that. I love that you schedules a me time,
Yeah,
which is so important
yeah,
because I'm right with you. It's very easy to neglect it. There are so
yeah,
many tasks which need to be done. And so it's very easy to go, oh, let me do this first and that first. And the next thing you know, it's evening and you haven't done
yeah.
that self care thing you wanted to do.
Then self-care thing. No, and especially when you're starting a podcast, the podcast editing may take precedence over the self-care. And it's like, nope.
So Vin's podcast is called Butterflies of Wisdom,
Yes,
and it comes out every Sunday and every Thursday.
yes.
And you interview so many people. It's like, how do you do it,
I,
Vin?
I my host. I've actually demoted myself to co-host as of today because I'm like this is too much. So I saw it that I made my co-host host, and that's how we do it. But I am typically in there and uploading podcasts 9 times out of 10. We do the fabulous interviews together, but I do the upload work and then I do the promotion. But I am a lifelong learner. I've decided that I am a lifelong learner. So I decided after I wrote my book, people were asking me, how do I do this amazing things with Sam Palsy? And I thought, well, if I turn on the podcasting mic one more time, people are going to tune me out. And if I say I have cerebral palsy, people are going to tune me out. So why not bring solo entrepreneurs in and why not bring other people in? Do you know I have never had a no in my life?
That's fantastic.
I've had I'm too busy, circle back with me, but do you know I've never had a no.
And you have some big names on your podcast.
Yeah, yeah. And so do you know I've never had a no, which I thought when I was starting out, oh great, people are going to be scared of disability here. But no, people want to learn about disabilities and business and solo entrepreneurship.
For sure. I think it's so important that, we are all one society. And I think the more we come to that point of understanding that we are all one, that we can't stand aside, no matter what is our difference, if it's color, if it's disability, if it's religion, we are still all people. We need to figure out how to help each other.
I definitely agree. And so that is what I plan to do. And excuse me as I deal with this. See, here's another tip for you guys that just came up. When you have a podcast, you're taking on another full time job. So if you're not ready to, and Mariana and Maurice Denise, I called your co-host Maurice for some weird reason. Mariana and Denise know this. When you're not ready to take on a full-time job, don't be taking on a podcast.
Yeah, I think people very much underestimate how much time and energy goes into every single episode. But that's okay. We are doing it because we choose to do it. And
Yeah, well, hopefully, hopefully. But right now, I am looking at a successful podcast, and it's really amazing how quickly your story spreads. And I think I texted you guys and said, and then you said we have a podcast, and then I found Mailman's Guide to the Galaxy
yes,
via your podcast, and so it's a real community when it comes down to it. And surprise, surprise, I've been accepted into this able-bodied community. I mean, I have an able-bodied voice, but I didn't realize how loving and accepting the podcast community is.
I think we all understand what we are doing and we want to help each other. And I'm so glad you found the Zimmerman's Guide. I wanted to recommend him to you to interview, but you already found him. Yay!
Oh, I found him. I found him.
Excellent.
So
Yeah.
I found him. It's been amazing how the podcast community has accepted me, and then it's been amazing how the podcast community wants to share the information.
Yes. And I think this is the power we have that we're all independent and there's nobody paying us to say anything in a certain direction that we get to say what we want to say. And I think that's very powerful.
Well, yeah, I do too. And here's another tip for you guys: just ask people if they want to be a sponsor to your show. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say yes. And then 9 times out of 10, they might just have to readjust. I had a call at 7 o'clock my time, 9 a.m. Eastern time, with one of my sponsors telling me that she's focusing on a book and wanted to quit sponsoring the podcast. I said to her that, and this is what I said to her: why don't we promote the book instead of doing what we were doing? And she goes, I'm so happy I talked to you. That's a wonderful idea. So you have to adjust with the ebbs and flows of the podcast life. Yeah, because it's changing so much that it's not even funny. And people go, well, I don't want to do a podcast. I'm like, well, people don't have time to read blogs anymore. So you can, if you want to get your content out there, a podcast is the best way to do it.
It's definitely an excellent way. So, would you tell me more about the jewelry you're making?
Well, before I started writing, I was a self taught digital artist. I don't do it as much as I should, but the reason why I mention my jewelry is because that is in my teen novel. That's in my bio. That's a reference to my teen novel called The View from My Hills, talking about all different disabilities. So that reference to artwork and me making artwork is a reference in my teen novel. And yes, I have a teen novel. I didn't go with the adults necessarily. I went with the teens. I went with the kids. I went with the. Now I'm back to the adults after 4 years of not doing it.
So that was your incentive to become a graphic artist?
Yes, my incentive to talk about it in that book was my previous work before I became an author and a motivational speaker and a podcast host. right now I'm fully focused on the podcast, and I'm fully focused on the authoring of my books and inspiring people with disabilities.
That's plenty, plenty to do, as we know.
And I also have a part-time day job. So,
What is your day job?
and my day job, my original background is teaching. That's where my original degree comes from. So add that all in, it makes a very busy life for a solo entrepreneur.
I would say so. That's a lot. You're exercising, you're doing a podcast, which is basically a full time job. You have a full time job. That's pretty amazing.
Yes.
Really. So I really thank you for taking the time to speak to me. What are some of the difficulties you might encounter moving around in the world? And what are some things people could do to be more aware or more helpful?
Oh God, you got me on a soapbox now. You got me on a soapbox now. I'll give it to you in a nutshell. Okay, people could, one, if they see a disabled person, simply open the door
Hmm.
for them and hold the door, because pushing a wheelchair and opening a door don't mix. And so, and just be aware of what's going on around you. If you see a disabled person, just say hi to them, as I said to the top of the interview. And if you see a disabled person struggling, ask them how I can help you. 9 times out of 10, they'll say, I got it, I got it, I got it. But 9 times out of 10, they'll say, thank you very much, because they're not used to people saying, how can I help you? So that's what you should do, and how you should communicate with the disabled. Not only say hi, but help them as much as you can.
Excellent. That's really good advice. And holding open a door is so easy. And not just when you see somebody who is disabled, if you see a mom with two kids and grocery bags, opens the door.
Yes,
Help.
yes, exactly.
This is just common courtesy we can introduce back into the world.
Yeah, yeah. So, this is just common courtesy. Uh, Hold the door open for people that are able-bodied too.
For sure. Really, I think in many ways, my point is that a disabled person is not different from another person. We all have different ability levels. And
Yes,
let's just be kind to each other.
yeah. Things will be naturally fine if we just look beyond the scope of the disability, and then we can be functioning society. But no, we have to outcast the disability, and God forbid if they stick them in the classroom with the untrained aid. That's another soapbox that I could get into easily. And she's laughing at me because she knows I'm in education. But it's so hard when we outcast these people.
Absolutely. To me, outcasting just never works. And that's not what we want to do as a functioning society, because I feel we need to take care of each other no matter what. That's just my opinion here. Win, is there a subject you really want to bring up and tell our listeners about?
Well, I would really like to bring up, if you go, and this is a plug for me, and this is a plug for you guys, if you go back, I believe it was with Janice, you guys did a really interesting episode on the transformation of communities
Mm-hmm. It's a transition. Mm-hmm.
and the transition. And so, if you guys go back and listen to that episode, you'll be fascinated what the interviewer brought up. I didn't know that that existed myself. And also, you guys, if you leave a review in iTunes, either for Butterflies of Wisdom or the Sustainable Living podcast, we would truly appreciate it because, and Marianne, as Marianne said at the top of this interview, we all doing this work independently. On the occasion, we get sponsors, which is nice, but most of us are doing this work independently. And for those of you who heard of John Lee Dumas of Eel Fire, Eel Fire, he started out as an unknown, now he's a known. But
And you
uh,
had him on your podcast.
I am still trying to get him on my podcast.
Oh, I
He
said I saw him scheduled in.
he completely missed the interview.
Oh,
There's a good one. John Lee Dumas completely misses the interview. This good one. And so, yeah, but that's how busy he is. But I'm still trying to do that. But it's so interesting that people forget that we do this work because we're passionate about it. And yes, I do have sponsors for my podcast, which is nice. But 9 times out of 10, people do this work without sponsorships. So if you guys want to go support any podcast, any podcaster would be greatly appreciated.
absolutely. Yeah, we just started to open a page on Patreon. So that's kind
Yes.
of an idea since we believe so much in community. We figured we haven't really opened it up yet. We just have been well, it's launched, but we haven't publicized it yet. But basically, we are hoping that the community finds value in what we do and supports us. And even if it's $1 a month, if enough people do it, then with time that becomes something we can work with and
Yeah.
buy better microphones and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
My dream is a house cleaner because that's one task I absolutely do not like.
Oh, oh God. Well, I think it's going to have to go towards podcasting equipment first before
For sure, for sure. That's a
and
long ways off. But a girl can dream, right?
you guys can do a podcast with just a cell phone. There's that's a tip for you guys. You don't need all this fancy equipment. You guys can just do it with a pod with a
Yes.
cell phone and a pair of headphones. So for those of you that want to start a podcast, um, go ahead and do it. Get your voices out there, but ask the experts, and the experts will charge you a little bit of money. Don't necessarily go to Podcasting in Paradise, which is John Lee Dumas's course. Come and find me, and I'll help you too. But basically, if you want to support all types of podcasters, just go search in iTunes and find something that tickles your fancy, and then see what they're doing and model your program after that. Don't copy, but use that as a baseline model.
Very good advice. Very good advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Vin, is there something else you would like to bring to the audience?
Oh, well, we talked about education.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that for an hour. But I would think that just be kind to the disabled people around you, even if they're physically disabled, but especially the mentally disabled, because mental disabilities are huge in this country. I don't know about Germany, where you're from, but mental disabilities are huge in the U.S.
I think they have become more and more worldwide. Just with so much trauma throughout history,
Yeah.
people react, and it's it's maybe an even harder disability to deal with because you don't see it. You know, it's not like if somebody, for example, has claustrophobia and might use a handicapped bathroom because there's more space in it. I have heard people say that they would get dirty looks in the restroom, but they have a real disability. It's just an invisible one. I thank you for bringing this up
Yeah.
because it's definitely something I think which gets hidden more because it's more hideable, maybe, and it's
Yep.
absolutely maybe because of that more isolating. It's harder to find community. And yeah, thank you for bringing it up because that's definitely some I think we all need to be aware of and just let go of making assumptions why somebody might be acting a certain way.
Yes. And that's what's the biggest misconception with me and my physical disability. I feel like the physical disability, but people still judge me like there's no tomorrow. But with mental disabilities and physical disabilities, there's a huge difference. So you may just want to be aware of the service dog that hops on the airplane or the service bunny that's in the cage helping that person cope, and it's more strongly with mental disabilities than it is with um, physical disabilities because we all know and love the service dogs, but at the same time, service dogs are good for mental disabilities too.
Absolutely. So I think Win is always open to have more guests on her show. So if you have
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I'm always open from leads to this from leads from the Sustainable Living podcast to my podcast, not only to promote my podcast, but to be a guest on my podcast. And that information is in the show notes, or you guys can contact me via Twitter at Win Kelly, Kelly, Charles, CHARLESWIN, being the first name in my Twitter handle. And of course, that's the @sign. And you guys can tweet me and tell me what you think, and then I'll try and fit you in to my schedule. So if you guys want to contact me, go ahead and I'll give you the information.
excellent. Yeah. I think it's excellent to support each other as podcasters. At the time of the recording, Win thought that she was going to need a back surgery. Luckily, she didn't need the surgery after all, but I left our conversation in because I thought it was interesting what her plan was.
It's not going to be that big a surgery. It's just going to be a small surgery, so I hope. But that again, you never know with CP um, what's going to happen on a daily basis. So I will just make a public announcement to my fan base when they all need to get the ducks in a row. And I am planning to only take 72 hours off of work. And
Wait a minute. What was it self care thing? I don't think that's
oh,
self care.
oh
That's
God,
not
you
self
caught me.
care,
You
lady.
caught me. Okay, okay, okay. So I have to do practice what I preach.
Yes.
But I will be continuing doing the podcast from a sitting up position. And it may sound a little weird because of all the icky stuff they put in your body. But as we talked about, self care is a must. And so I'm going to try and continue with the podcast. But if I need to take care of myself first, I need to take care of myself first to get myself back up on my feet.
I'm this is my soapbox here. I think people here are not honoring their body's healing powers by pushing on too fast. And
Yes.
like when I grew up, so saying was like, if you were sick for a week, well, obviously you should take off that week and rest, and then you should take another week off and rest because that's what your body needs to recuperate. And I think in this country, everybody pushes through everything. And sometimes I think it's good to not push. There has to be that balance between pushing through some and taking care of yourself. So here is
I
my
definitely,
soapbox to you.
ah,
Take care of
I,
yourself, lady.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree. And depending on how big my surgery is going to be, I'm just going to take it easy. I may, I may, you guys, put episodes of doing it with my host, doing it in the can, so they can publish while I am resting, lounging like a cat. And
I think that's a much better plan than
yes,
to go, oh, I'm going to get off the table and I'm going to start working right away.
uh, no, and it's going to be interesting because of my medical situation with what I have done medically. We just have to see what the medical community will do, and will the medical community be nice enough to let me do self-care, or will they kick me out of the hospital in 48 hours? I don't know.
Yeah, we find out, huh? And I'm sure you're going to keep us
We
posted.
find out. And so that's going to be my plan. My plan is to stick episodes in the can, and so they can self-publish on their own. And while I'll be resting, I because now I need to do practicing when I preach to everyone else. That's a good point that you guys brought up, because I'm always practicing what I preach is, don't let a disability get on top of you. Now I'm saying the opposite. I'll go back to work in 48 hours or whatever. And I'm like, nope, that's not that's not going to happen, especially when I cut your back open. That didn't happen round and run. That didn't happen round and run, and that didn't happen. I believe it didn't happen round two. So round three, it's not going to happen either. But I just wanted to tell you guys, go, if you want to go listen to a podcast, and I don't know when this recording will be out, but go this sleep podcast. I'll recommend not only the Sustainable Living podcast, that's a fabulous podcast run by you guys, but
Thank
another
you.
fabulous podcast is the Mailman's Guide to the Galaxy, which he is legally blind and dealing with. I the depths of becoming legally blind, and he talks about mental illness and what's going on. So that's another podcast that
For
talks
sure.
about mental illness. And then, of course, my podcast, we can
Of course.
that one. And then Positive Productivity Podcast is another good one. That's run by Kim Seth, and I've also been on that one. I think between Sustainable Living, and I think that the Positive Productivity is my two top favorites right now. So that's another tip for you guys. If you want to start a podcast, be very careful of your intro music and outro music.
There's music in the public domain, just as there's books in the public domain, and those are safe to use. But if
Safe.
somebody has rights to the music, you really don't want to.
And you have to get the rights, and that's a whole another can of worms in itself, getting the rights. And I know Columbia Records and all these big records companies are very protective of their rights. Trust me, ask me. knowledge.
Yeah. But here's my tip. I think there are a lot of musicians out there which would love to be featured, and they might do it for free or they might do it for very little money.
Yeah,
And you could get original music and support fellow artists.
independent artists. Yes, independent artists. There's a ton out there that you can just do independent artist work, and that will save you a lot of money and a lot of heartache. So
I want to point it out, said if you're a small potatoes, probably nobody cares. But we all hope that we make it big someday, right? And we get a big
yeah,
audience. And when you get that big audience and somebody hears music you're not authorized to use, that could cause legal trouble and problems. So
yeah,
best to avoid, right? We don't want any more problems
that's to avoid.
than we have to
No,
have.
no, we don't want. And I know that Apple's the bots are fairly finicky, so I've been told that the bots are very finicky as to what is put in iTunes system. That's why I'm giving those tips to you about podcasting. Is you just want to make Apple and all these distributed
Yeah.
happy.
I mean, since we do it to be heard, we might as well do everything in our power to make that possible
Yeah,
and not end up on a
yeah.
blacklist somewhere.
Nope, nope. Because once you end up on a blacklist, you're not going to have a easier time
Yeah,
getting out
for
of it.
sure. So
No,
I think you had a very generous offer so that people can contact you to be interviewed on the show. Now, are you having specifics you're looking for in your guests?
you bring up a very good point. I want someone to inspire the person that's bedbound. I want someone that inspires the person with the mental disability that is not seeing the light of day right now and that thinks I can't do it, but they can.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to be on your podcast, so I do my best to be inspirational.
Well, yeah, yeah, but we can always talk about this sustainable living.
Well, and luckily, there are a lot of people in the world which are very passionate about what they're doing and what they're bringing to the world. And
Yes,
that's
yes,
what we love
exactly.
because we never run out of topics and people to talk about.
No, we never went down the topics of
For
people.
sure. Vin,
Yes.
thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, you're welcome.
I think you're a true inspiration to people. I love that you are not letting CP define you. I think you're using it for your advantage, but that's not who you are. You are the podcaster, you are the author, you are that woman showing up really strong in the world. And I love that. Thank you so much.
Yes. Let's keep the download numbers up on this podcast. And today, as a matter of fact, actually, last time I checked, I have finally reached, I believe, 30,000 downloads of my podcast all time. So that's really exciting for me. And so let's just keep supporting each other, and you guys make it a beautiful day. And I will share this episode on social media. And that's my last tip is to, if you see a podcast, you guys share it out with your communities, and then it will make all of us happy.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now, as promised, Dr. Adrian Cooper.
Hi everyone, it's Adrienne Cooper here. The first podcast about community nature reserves that I did with SustainableLivingPodcast.com was released on March the 8th this year. But between then and now, I've had messages from right across the United States and 14 other nations asking to learn more about how to start and develop a community nature reserve. And although I've answered each of those messages personally, I wanted to talk about some of them here because I think they're just great questions, and I also think that they might help other listeners. Anyway, I had a wonderful question from Naomi in Naples, Florida, and Naomi wrote into the Facebook page of Felixstowe's Community Nature Reserve, and Naomi said, "Dear Adrian, I really want to start a new community nature reserve in my neighbourhood, but I don't feel confident about talking to strangers in my neighbourhood about this wonderful idea. Do you have any suggestions about how I can start my community nature reserve?" Well, first of all, Naomi, thank you for that great question. And actually, you're not alone in raising that issue. In fact, 23 other people have written in with pretty much the same question as you. What I'd suggest is that you might want to start off by creating a new Facebook page for your community nature reserve. And by the way, please feel free to use any of the content and pictures from the Felixstowe Community Nature Reserve Facebook page, if that would help you. Then write a notice that you can have pinned up in your local library or your local community centre or even the community board on your local grocery store, telling local people about your great idea of starting a community nature reserve and referring them to your community nature reserve Facebook page where you can receive their questions. Then, when you've had enough local people interested, you can agree to meet in a public place where you all feel comfortable to develop things from there. But beyond that, you might also want to write into your local community radio station to see if they'd like to interview you about starting a new community nature reserve, or you might want to write a short feature for your local newspaper. Anyway, I hope those ideas are helpful. But I had another great question from Sally, who lives near Austin, Texas. And Sally wrote in saying, "Dear Adrian, I want to start a new community nature reserve. I love the idea, but I don't know too much about plants, and I also have a pretty small backyard too. What can I do?" Well, Sally, again, that is a great question. I have to tell you that everyone involved in community nature reserves is always learning more and more about plants. So really, we're all students together. Anyway, to start off your part of your new community nature reserve, how about planting just some of your favourite herbs? So you might want to try planting some rosemary or some thyme or some chives. And maybe you'd like to plant a small row of each of those herbs just to see how they get on in your backyard. And then, as a total contrast, how about planting a couple of your favourite rose bushes, just enough to fit into the size of your backyard? So right there, with only some herbs and some roses, you've got some beautiful colours, and you'll find bees and other insects will find your plants sooner than you might think. And finally, tell your family, friends and neighbours about what you've done. Anyway, let me now deal with a great question that I received from Jutta from near Frankfurt, Germany. And Jutta wrote in saying she loves butterflies, but she wants to have some plants in her backyard garden that's going to attract butterflies. Well, Jutta, there I can recommend honeysuckle as a plant that will grow on almost any fence or wall that you might have. But also think about ice plant, wallflowers, verbena, Aubrietia, and many more. In actual fact, I think your question is just so great, Jutta. I'm going to devote an entire podcast just to this question of attracting butterflies and moths too to our wildlife-friendly gardens or our apartment balconies or window planters as part of our community nature reserves. But I have to say thank you so much to everyone who sent in your questions and comments about starting a community nature reserve. Please keep sending them in, either to the Facebook page of Felixstowe's Community Nature Reserve or to sustainablelivingpodcast.com. Bye for now.
We are so grateful to have Dr. Cooper on our team. Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper. And I hope you all go and check out the Facebook page and, more importantly, go and plant something. There are so many plants which make bees and other insects happy, look pretty, and make us happy as well. So we are asking you to do things like planting a plant for a wildlife. And now we're going to ask you some else. We just recently started a Patreon page, and this is a way of you as a listener be able to support us in bringing more podcasts to you and supporting our work. Basically, Patreon came from the idea of the artist in olden days being supported by a patron, the patron of the arts, right? So you had the Da Vinci's and Mozart's and so forth, which had their living expenses paid for by a rich patron. And we're able to dedicate also time to their art. Now, we are not saying we are anything like a Da Vinci or Mozart. And we're assuming you're not a duke or somebody super rich. So what we ask you to do is hop on over to the site at patreon.com. It's Sustainable Living, and I link it in the show notes. And pledge $1 a month. We would love if you could support us with $1 a month. Then we can pay for the fees it costs to host a podcast, to get a new microphone as they tend to break ever so often, and just cover all the other costs involved with a podcast. We hope we are bringing you value, and we would love to see your support. Thank you so much. And if you don't have money, we totally get it. You know, we all have been there. Then please do share our episodes around. Give us a review on iTunes. We totally appreciate you, and thank you so much for listening.